Hello and welcome to Cinema Eclectica, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are the Geek Show's dedicated movie podcast. I'm Graham, and this week I've been joined by Sarah.
Hello.
And Aidan.
Rock and roll!
Yes. In the second half of the show, as Aidan has gently introduced into the conversation, we are commemorating the reissue of Ken Russell's Tommy with a rock movie special. But before we get onto that, we have the small matter of our film of the week, which we've had a few films of the week where we've gone a bit smaller than the big release, and I think it's mostly paid off recently. I mean, we could have done Frozen.
Well, I mean,
I would totally have done Frozen.
We could have done Blue Story, assuming it wasn't, say, pulled from cinemas for extremely stupid reasons. Oh, wait! But we did neither of these things. We did Judy and Punch, a film by the Australian actress and director Mira Fowkes, starring Mia Wasikowska and really cinema's go-to Charles Manson, Damon Herriman, in a rare non-Charles Manson role.
That was a hint at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
And Mindhunter, the Netflix series about Terry Mindhunter. He also plays Manson in that.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
I've never really heard that one before.
But yeah, that's... I shouldn't reference stupid Twitter memes that only I get on the show, but Terry Mindhunter always makes me giggle. It's called Mindhunter. He isn't really called Terry Mindhunter, but still. But yeah, this is set in the fictional town of Seaside, England, which is nowhere near the sea. It's kind of, I would say, creatively unclear where it's set, when it's set.
There's a bit of a mix in there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's in, I don't know, let's just describe it as Blackadder time.
Yeah, it's kind of 1600s-ish, but then there's some modern elements thrown in for good measure.
Yeah, there are some surprise verbal anachronisms, and, although I won't spoil it, but it did make me laugh, one absolutely storming Braveheart joke.
Well, okay then. I wouldn't expect that from a film based on Punch and Judy, but...
No, well, it's a pretty slippery topic because it is about puppeteers whose puppet show is... I don't know whether they're meant to be portrayed as like the innovators of Punch and Judy or just people doing that kind of show. But,
I don't think they are the innovators of it. I think it was a tradition long before that, like Italian. In the original Italian, it was called Pulcinello with an L, and right. He had his dual personality from his two dads.
Right.
A very early depiction of a family shape that could be appropriated by a gay audience.
I was going to say quite progressive for 15th century Italian puppet theatre.
But I think he declares himself to be the greatest puppeteer, but that's only according to him, I think.
Yeah. And he's not a reliable source on matters connected to his own greatness.
This is true.
Because Herriman's Mr. Punch is a terrible husband, a terrible father, a drunken, domineering man, a man who takes credit for his wife's work. And
he's not a great puppeteer either.
He's not even that good a puppeteer, really. His only major skill is as a Charles Manson impersonator, and he's living way too early for that to do any good.
Okay, now come on.
Although it's his way of manipulating crowds.
Yeah, I see you, Herriman. So, I'm kind of dancing around something here, because has anyone seen the trailer for this?
I didn't know.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I think I saw it a couple of times.
The trailer has a particular kind of outline of the plot where it says, Judy and Punch are puppeteers. He's a terrible drunk. He loses their baby, and she goes to find the baby and get her own back on him, which isn't quite what happens in the film.
No, a bit misleading, that, I think.
I see why they did it. I'm not sure if I want to exactly say it, but there is a plot twist that is darker than you'd expect right at the end of Act 1.
Yeah, that's a shocking moment.
And I was sort of wondering how well could the film write itself after that?
It's just, it was such a mixed emotion moment. It is dark, but it's not just dark.
And it happens in a film which, up until that point, had been dark, yeah, but pretty obviously dark comedy. I mean, there were people being stoned for being witches, which is...
Happy Stoning Day.
Exactly, yes. It's played in absolute sort of Monty Python terms.
Yes!
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think that there's an awareness that this is a bad thing that's happening, as well as a completely anachronistic thing that happened. I don't think any witches were ever stoned in England, but then I don't think most of this would happen anyway, so who cares? But it is mostly played for laughs for that first third, I would say.
Yeah, I think it sort of draws you into thinking, this is a bumbling comedy, it's amusing, these rye bumpkins.
And then suddenly it's not.
And then suddenly it's really not.
Yeah.
Oh God, what just happened? The tone just changed dramatically.
And I think in some ways it sort of has to do that. I suppose I have this theory that every dark comedy has to have a core of sincerity. It has to have something that it's actually angry about.
Yeah.
In order to justify what it's laughing at. And in this case, I would say violence against women is its moral lodestar. That's the thing that exercises folks and makes her angry.
Hence the connections between Punch and Judy, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But it's such a strange film, and I think mostly strange in a way that I enjoyed, but I can imagine people really taking against this. Yeah,
I think it could get people's back up for having such a variable tone. But that's also why I think it's really clever. I think that it's done deliberately. It does have those hilarious knockabout farce moments. But it does grab you by the comfort and thrusts you into some very dark places, even as your face still carries a smile. But the editor and director, I think, sort of make you feel as guilty as any Stanford experiment participant after the fact.
Yeah.
I think like the mob in this film, and it's just you can't help thinking about the current political situation. We only want to see the positive side. We don't want to acknowledge this dark side of humanity, and this sort of you want to turn a blind eye to it. But what they've done is actually very clever. They crack open a much more widespread and very human issue of turning that blind eye to darker behaviour, like domestic violence or the origins of the whole Me Too movement. And I thought that was extremely well wrought.
And it's not even in terms of turning a blind eye to it. It's about, as Aidan says, about, Punch and Judy, about using it for entertainment.
Yeah, and the kids being entertained by it and stuff.
There is a wonderful montage over the end credits of children watching, Punch and Judy shows in actual documentary footage.
Yeah, old footage.
Some of them seem really disturbed by it, and some of them seem disturbingly entertained by it.
It's true, some of them look like they're about to burst into tears.
But it is critiquing something that it also does. And I think it just about gets away with that. It just about gets away with having these acts of violence, particularly against female characters, in the context of something that is also kind of knockabout. No pun intended. But it's not something that I think is going to please everyone. I admire them for going for it, but it's a weird film in a lot of ways.
It is. I think about it mostly positively, but it does sort of make you go, oh no.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
I think part of it is because that end of Act 1 thing had me thinking, you've messed this up quite badly. But then, straight after that, there's that remarkable bit with Mia Wasikowska going into the forest and the trees sort of parting for her, and I thought, I have no idea where this is going, and that's good.
Yeah, it's that old Chinese proverb about breaking the vase and gluing it back together, and it's like a symbol for when your head is cracked and when you've experienced mental illness. That's the light of a spiritual force coming in, being allowed in, and you reassemble the vase, and it sort of reminds you that it is matter, but it's also infused with spirit. And I think that's how it is for Judy and Punch. It is very earthy and, down to earth, salt of the earth type crowd of people. But there's also something quite magical in there in the forest.
Reportedly, there's a similar kind of plot element to what you were just talking about in Harriet, the Harriet Tubman biopic that came out the same week.
Right, yeah.
That she began to receive religious visions after recovering from a head injury.
Interesting.
It's a trend.
Mm-hmm. And also in this film, as the next film I'm going to talk about, and the previous film I was talking about, there's a ragtag bunch of people living communally in the woods. And this taps into something quite deeply set for me. They still had a private space when they needed it in this film, in Judy and Punch, but they always had a big group of people around, so they weren't isolated and could share meals and so on. And I think there's something really deep in my soul that remembers living like that a few centuries ago.
Well, it's fairy folklore, isn't it? It has that appeal that the forest's a place where you go where the rules of society don't apply and people can form.
Yeah, Midsummer Night's Dream and Robin Hood.
Oh, yeah, that's a good connection, actually, the Midsummer Night's Dream reference, because I did get vibes of that in Judy and Punch from seeing the trailer. It's fair to note that I never got round to seeing this film because I've just been like horrendously busy. But no, I was going to ask about how Mia Wasikowska was in this, because it seems to be a while since we had anything from her that was, I didn't know whether she had fallen off the radar slightly or not.
Yeah, I honestly think the last thing we covered that had her in was actually Pacific Rim, which is shocking considering how much we've...
Pacific Rim?
It's not Pacific Rim, the other Del Toro one, Crimson Peak.
Yeah.
I would get those two things confused as well, I think. It seems similar title-wise.
Similar titles, somewhat different films, yeah. But she'd had a few things that we were kind of looking forward to that just didn't quite make it into cinemas here, like Damsel, the David Zellner film that she was in.
Oh, yeah, I remember doing that as a preview, actually. Yeah,
but I've made absolutely no secret of the fact that I absolutely adore her. I think she's one of the best actors of her generation. I think that no one can carry a candle into a creepy old cellar quite like her.
She played this with a grace and quiet determination. Yes.
Yeah.
It's very good. Yeah. And I think the revenge is very appropriate. Rob, other Rob, Rob Simpson, asked me on Saturday what I thought of Judy and Punch, and I said that I couldn't quite make my mind up about it, but it was mostly positive.
Yeah,
and I think the same about her playing of this role. I wanted, I think she accomplished it very well. I'm not criticizing her. I don't know about the revenge story, but then I realised that my thoughts about that are inappropriate for the tale of Punch and Judy. I think it would have been a better. I personally would like an exploration of not of revenge, but of an evolution in somebody who's a bit more enlightened over his actions, etc. But then I just thought, well, that's not Judy and that's not Punch and Judy at all.
Yes.
So that's really inappropriate. So let's put that aside.
I mean, the cast is strong. I think she's a standout, but I really enjoy Tom Budge as the local policeman.
Oh, he was delightful. He was very sweet. Yeah.
He's, fantastically wet. You don't want him to run with any of your problems, but he is a lot of fun.
Yeah. I thought the other guy was good as well. He played his role well.
Damon Herriman.
No, not Punch. The chap who was saying Happy Stoning Day a lot, and he was he was the friend of Damon Herriman.
Every time I just keep getting flashbacks to Monty Python and his Life of Brian there.
It's very like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting performance because that's the furthest out tonally that the film goes. That's like the wackiest comedy element of it, and it feels well positioned. I did like that performance as well.
Yeah, I really like the soundtrack as well. I thought that was gorgeous, and it just put me in another time warp situation. In the early 70s, my dad was well into electronic music and had an album called Switched on Bach, which was
Wendy Carlos.
Musical, like a Moog version of Bach music. And as soon as this came on, I was just like, oh my God, it's the early 70s again. And it was gorgeous. It's really lovely.
It has, the score is by Francois Tétez, and it covers a lot of ground. There is that kind of classical electro stuff that Sarah mentioned. There's also quite a lot of kind of dissonant, folky cello stuff, which is a type of score that I had thought, I was completely sick of by now, because we've had a year where that kind of drony cello sound has been in everything from Joker to Midsummer, and I thought, that's enough, but it works here. It's good.
Yeah.
So, aside from Punch and Judy, do you think there are any other old mythical legends from the British Isles that could use film treatment?
I mean, I want my mythologically correct scary fairies. Fairies in Renaissance literature are horrible jerks. I want a movie about them.
Cool. I thought maybe the Lambton Worm could do with a reboot.
Yes.
I figure like Keanu Reeves could probably play John Lambton quite well. With Gary Oldman as the worm.
Yes, I was going to say with his English accent that thrilled us in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
I think you'd have to have a cameo from Amanda Donohoe as the wise woman as well.
Well, that is the thing, isn't it? Which probably leads us quite well into the second half of the show. But Ken Russell used elements of the Lambton Worm story in Lair of the White Worm.
Yeah.
Featuring Amanda Donohoe and Hugh Grant and Peter Capaldi back when he looked like a goddamn angel, man. I mean, but yes, stay on that Ken Russellian thought, listeners, because we shall return to him.
Indeed.
Perplexed by the pompous, ponderous piffle purveyed by normal art critics? Well, you've come to the right place, because we're not normal. We take a not-so-serious look at the serious worlds of art and literature. Join Sarah, Andrew, Rob and Graham for a piffle-free journey through the cultural landscape of the 21st century. Literary loitering. Because you can't make a cultural omelette without smashing a few eggheads.
Well, I may be hungry, but there's always time for the Geek Show.
So if you enjoy what you're listening to, you can donate to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show. We are on Twitter at TGS_The Geek Show, and we are on Facebook. Just search for The Geek Show. You can also go to thegeekshow.co.uk, where you can find our store and all our written reviews. So, if you do go to thegeekshow.co.uk, you can find all our written reviews. I have recently done a review of the Criterion Collection's reissue of Moonrise Kingdom, Wes Anderson's yellowest film.
True that.
But if you stay with us for a bit longer, we are having a special edition. We're having a rock movie special, and there is a reason for this, is there not, Aidan?
Yeah, so this week, why we were doing this rock movie special is because of a special release in general, and that was Ken Russell's 1975 film, Tommy. Of course, based off the album by The Who of the same name from 1969, I think.
I can't fact check you there, I don't know.
So generally speaking, I mean, I've always been quite a big fan of The Who, but I think this has been something that's been incoming for a while, because of course I like the band an awful lot, and it's also a first for me, because this is my first Ken Russell film.
Whoa!
So I think going into this, well, how to describe Tommy in general, but essentially what the plot is that Tommy, if I'm familiar with the concept of Tommy, because of course it was based off the album of the same name, it follows the titular character known as Tommy, who initially grows up, gets born in a household with a person known as Captain Walker, who works in World War II, along with his wife. The father gets involved in, I believe he disappears somewhat in like a battle somewhere, and so the stepfather takes over the family, essentially, played by, in the case of this, is played by, I think he's called Bernie, and he's played by Oliver Reed, the legendary actor.
Actor/legend.
Yes, I absolutely love him. And he runs like a summer camp, a beach camp with, all these like women in bikinis, obviously, with like very heavy like seaside overtones to it. And but then it soon discovers that Captain Walker didn't disappear at all, and he returns to the household, and of course this freaks Oliver Reed's character out. He goes and murders him quite horribly, and Tommy is a witness to this as a child, and that renders him, as in the words of I think Pete Townsend, as deaf, dumb and blind. So his character, and that character grows up into a young adult, played by The Who's frontman Roger Daltrey. And then this is where I guess the pure joy and rush of Tommy comes from, because this is where it gets a bit anarchic and mad. And it's kind of like that switcheroo nature to it, why I kind of love Tommy in general, because there is just such an interest there, because you always keep thinking to yourself, right, what's going to pop up next? Who's going to play this role in like the purpose of the album, if you've heard it before? But and I guess that sense of an eclectic cast really does give Tommy its like variation and like fun elements to it, because half the characters in like the second half of the film and the musical are really playing against like Tommy himself. So most of them either like horribly verbally abuse him. So say someone like Keith Moon's Uncle Ernie, I believe, who's like this really horrible kind of like... I believe it was actually referenced that he was referenced in the original book that his character was supposed to be a paedophile or something.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And he indicates this by cracking a raw egg into a glass of Newcastle brown ale. It's rather, it's quite, on the nose, really heavy stuff. But then you get to the other characters who really want to get him away from being deaf, dumb and blind, etc. So, and I think the two standout moments for me of who do this particularly very well is one, Tina Turner as the Acid Queen.
Yes.
Who, Tina Turner, I mean, without, saying anything, has always been, like, a great icon, because, like, most of this, of course, has dealt with, most of these roles are held by, like, famous singer-songwriters, who I'll explain on in a little bit. But I guess what Tina Turner just really captures us here is the Acid Queen, who is a cross between, like, this gypsy and a prostitute, who takes Tommy up into this apartment, and then, like, entombs him in this weird glass sarcophagus kind of thing, complete with, like, syringe poking inwards into Tommy. So essentially what she does is, like, injects Tommy with acid, really, in hopes to fix him up, into, like, render him into, like, into this divine state, I guess. And it's just got that, energy to her performance that really does make it, like, stand out for me.
Yeah.
So there's Tina Turner as that, which is a great segment. There's the fantastic sequence with Pinball Wizard, with Elton John as the Wizard.
Yes.
Who Elton John, who has to be said, is wearing, like, the biggest boots I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, amazing.
Made the biggest boots with
like something off Yellow Submarine,
with basically like the size of like two cars, really, on stilts. It's absolutely extraordinary, and it's just got such a rhythm to it that you just feel like Ken Russell's just having a blast here with the close-ups going here, then everywhere. You've got a roaring crowd. You have Tommy like playing against the champion of the court, really, and then just firing off pinballs in this direction, like the only thing that he can get logic out of or sense, really, or any type of fun. And it is just a really great, visually euphoric moment that I absolutely love to bits. And especially since this is also a rock musical in general, it really does help establish like how wild this is. It's absolutely fantastic. And there's many other like cameos as well that, as I was saying before, really does give like a lot of the film its flavour. I mean, I was mentioning Oliver Reed earlier, who you would think would be like the abusive stepfather figure towards Tommy's character. But at the same time, there's just this, you do get a sense of progression with him, even if it's like based off a concept album initially. And I mean, I have to like bring this up because I'm not the biggest fan of concept records in general. It's partly one of the reasons why I can't stand prog rock, really, because it's just it's just kind of like too much for me, really.
It's why punk happened.
Yes, but yeah, this is kind of the reason why I think Tommy gets away with it, really, because it's not really talking about specific like scientific theming or fantasy theming. It's more like taking it into this direction that feels much more singular, away from that crowd, really. And I guess that's where you get most of the joy from the casting, because you've also got, like I said, Oliver Reed, Tina Turner, Elton John, Jack Nicholson.
Yes!
Jack Nicholson's in this.
Really?
Yeah, he plays the doctor who... he's just like, again, I mean, I love Jack Nicholson in general, and he is just really kind of like, much different from the other characters who are always kind of wild. He's much more like, pared back, he often really establishes bravado straight away about what, he has to do alongside Oliver Reed. And, he's great in it in general. There's another segment featuring... the segment in the Marilyn Monroe church with Eric Clapton as the preacher and Arthur Brown just screaming into people's faces about how much they must sacrifice their life towards Marilyn Monroe. It's really weird. I don't understand what Marilyn Monroe has to do with this. I mean, I guess the best sense of...
Is that as in the crazy world of Arthur Brown?
Yes, it is. Yes. It's just an incredibly, like, garish moment that just really just sets Tommy's tone like straight away.
No, I was just going to confirm that, yes, that was Arthur Brown, as in the god of hellfire who will bring you fire and is also from Whitby.
That's the one.
It's true.
I didn't know that.
But no, it's just a fantastically entertaining musical. I think when it gets into the segments where, because I guess you could compare this to, because it's wall-to-wall music. There's not really any dialogue in it in general. But it just works towards like this establishing like this set rhythm all the time, where it's constantly evolving, constantly changing. There's segments in it that reminds me of, oh wait, is that supposed to be a jab at advertisements, like the Rex Beans segments in general, where you have like yes, which is just, you know, which in any other film would just like seem like a completely out of date moment, but since it's like in like the 70s musical, it just feels completely in tone and completely natural. But it's just constantly endearing, really fun, grin from ear to ear, I felt. And, you know, I think this is like a really good introduction into Ken Russell's work, really, because believe it or not, I mean, Ken Russell said, I think in an interview, that he didn't like rock musicals at all, really. And I think it just goes back to that point with, I remember Nicholas Winding Refn saying that I think in order to like set your own identity, you have to make, in like the film industry, you have to make films in a genre that you don't like.
Yeah.
It was something like that, and I think, you know, Ken Russell like purely established this like about 40 years before, and what you have is really like this really faithful adaptation and a really fun recreation of like a great work from an already fun rock band, really.
Yeah. I'm so glad that was your first Ken Russell film.
Would you say that would be like a perfect entry point into his work, really?
It's probably, for all that it is very strange, it's probably one of the most accessible points, yeah. My main tip to people getting into Ken Russell is do not skip a film just because you're not interested in the subject matter, because some of his early films, like, they seem to be about the stuffiest things you can imagine, all about 19th century painters and classical music, but in their own way, they're just as wild as this.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think which of his films I've seen, and is it Women in Love I've seen?
Yes, yeah, also with Oliver Reed.
Is that the fighting in the living room scene?
That's the one,
That's the one. Yeah, hard to forget.
No one actually talks about the pair-ups between Oliver Reed and Ken Russell on the same level as, like, De Niro or Scorsese
it's
or...
true. People should think of them in that way.
So, continuing the theme, listeners, if you think it's odd that Ken Russell would get the contract to direct a big, commercially viable rock musical... He was not the weirdest director who was getting these gigs during the 60s and 70s.
There was quite a few British directors, actually.
And one of them is the one I'm reviewing. It's a film called Privilege, a toe-tapping rock and roll musical for the kids from the director of The War Game.
And was it Edvard Munch as well?
Edvard Munch, yes. Was it 4.5-hour biopic of the legendarily depressing Norwegian painter?
Yeah.
So that was a completely insane decision, obviously. But the actual film makes a surprising amount of sense. Privilege is loosely based on a short story by Johnny Spate, who was most famous as... most famous as the creator of Till Death Do Us Part, which explains the kind of dyspeptic, satirical tone, which is quite unlike Watkins' other work. Watkins is always political, but rarely much of a chuckle.
Yeah, I think the most famous example of that is Punishment Park, isn't it?
Punishment Park is probably at like the high watermark of his political stuff, and I don't know whether it's the film he made straight after this or just quite close to it, but they're in the same area, and they share the methodology in that Watkins was a big believer in getting the message of his films across through the process of performance. In Punishment Park, he famously cast people according to their political views and had them act out a role in the story where they could express those. And in Privilege, he's doing a similar thing, albeit in a way that I think is easier for the market to understand. Because the central character of Privilege is Stephen Shorter, a pop star who makes the Beatles look smaller than Jesus. He is an absolute megastar in a near future Britain. There is a ticker tape parade for him when he comes back to his home city of Birmingham from a world tour. And he is played not by an actor, but by Paul Jones, the lead singer of Manfred Mann.
Oh.
And this has a lot of quite interesting sort of 60s figures in. The female lead is Jean Shrimpton, one of the key fashion faces of the 1960s.
Yeah, the shrimp.
The shrimp, yes. The glamour of the 60s is embodied in that nickname, isn't it? Strikingly beautiful woman who had to go through her life being referred to as the shrimp.
Yeah.
It also has a score, a very good score, it must be said. It does grasp that kind of not quite rock sort of late 60s pop feel quite well. What I'm saying is you could put this on a compilation tape in between Amen Corner and the Moody Blues, and
right.
No one would be able to tell which one of these bands was fictional. But it's done by Mike Leander. Now, Mike Leander went on to great success. He also probably wishes he didn't go on to great success because he made most of his money as the chief songwriter and arranger for Gary Glitter.
Oh, what a shame.
You know that subgenre of reviews that I do where I have to keep stopping it and saying, now, before you judge...
I know, but considering in hindsight, that's a very hard task to pull off.
I've been a very big evangelist for Mike Leander because I think he gets rid of the nation's guilt. Like, you know that horrible feeling we all had when we watched Joker and thought, oh, Rock and Roll Part 2 is such a great song. Oh, yeah, but it's Gary Glitter, isn't it?
Yeah. It does feel like Todd Phillips was trying to be edgy when he didn't really need to be.
Yeah. But you don't have to feel like that, because Rock and Roll Part 2 is all Leander, isn't it? All Gary Glitter did was just turn up and shout, hey.
Yeah.
That's the extent of his contribution. Think of it as a Mike Leander song, and it's perfectly fine to still enjoy it. But I'm getting sidetracked. So after Stephen Shorter comes home, you see him perform one of his concerts. And Peter Watkins, who is, as he was in earlier films like Culloden and The War Game, is heard on the soundtrack in voiceover, explains to his audience that the violence of Shorter's act is very extreme, but it is meant to be a reflection of society. And Shorter is led on stage in a cage. He is beaten by people dressed as policemen. There is this really serious kind of Clockwork Orange vibe to it, even though this was made, I think, about 4 or 5 years before Clockwork Orange.
I was going to ask about that.
It does have that sense that I suppose must have been around at the time that
British society is going to go towards this kind of creepy popcorn violence. But what is different is when we see why Shorter is doing this. Because Shorter is not as the lead character of pretty much every other rock movie of this era was. A wild young rebel who just wants to get away from his stuffy parents and make something of himself. Shorter is a government-backed pop star designed to channel youthful dissatisfaction towards the government and society in general, towards a more socially acceptable end.
Wow. That's cynical.
Yeah.
For that time.
It's interesting because a lot of the early rock movies are pretty cynical in some ways. When you look at the plot of something like Espresso Bongo or The Girl Can't Help It, it just takes it for granted that, you know, pop music is a dumb game which any talentless idiot can do.
Yeah.
Privilege is much darker, and it ends up with Shorter as something like a kind of proto-fascist demagogue who is being designed to lead British youth back to tradition.
Sorry, best use of the word demagogue I've ever heard, by the way.
Thank you. It's a great word. I'd say people should use it more often, though I think people often find cause these days. But he's designed to lead people back to nationalism, conservatism, the church. There's a fantastic interlude with a group of bishops masterminding their latest band, who are a bunch of like Mersey beaters wearing monks' habits with their heads shaved, who play like rock and roll versions of Onward Christian Soldiers and things like that.
Wow.
Well.
It's great, and I think despite his limitations as an actor, you get a sense from Jones as somebody who is absolutely trapped within this system as much as any of his audience are. I mean, for all that he's not exactly Stanislavski trained, you put him on stage, give him a microphone, and he can do something really emotive and expressive. The film's only real problem, I suppose, is something to do with the times it was made and how media literate people are, but there's never any sense of who is making this documentary and, you know, whether they are complicit in this weird kind of social control scheme. It's not unusual in Watkins's work, but it's more acceptable when it's something like Culloden, where you think, well, there is no way that a documentary crew could be filming the Battle of Culloden, and perversely, the fact that it's impossible means you just accept it. You don't think about it. In Privilege, it's a bit stranger because the whole film is about media power and propaganda, and it seems a bit remiss of Watkins not to ask where his film fits into that, but it is still a remarkably strange film. It was very hard to get hold of until about 3 or 4 years ago when the BFI Flipside, I think it was, BFI Flipside released it on a dual format disc, which also has some short films by Watkins on, and is really fine package. But
I heard the name Privilege before, actually, when you mentioned it. It must have been from BFI.
Yeah, I think that'll be it, because BFI Flipside's always worth keeping an eye on, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly are.
But yes, it's held up remarkably well. I think its politics are still quite provocative and confrontational. It's often very funny. The commercial he ends up shooting to encourage kids to eat more fruit is just absolutely ridiculous. And it is, I would say, essential viewing for anyone wondering what the hell's going on with Kanye West at the moment.
Well, speaking of directors who have taken an unusual road,
seems to be a recurring theme for the show.
Yes.
I'm going to talk about Hair, which is directed by Milos Forman, one of Graham's friends.
Yeah.
The huge Czech director, and the film is from 1979. And it's billed as a tribal love rock musical. So it's not just a rock musical, it's a tribal love rock musical. And clearly many of the men in it were in touch with their love rock. So, we pictured the scene. We open with lots of bland opening shots of Oklahoma, big spaces rolling out to the horizon, a palette of mainly greys and beige. Our hero, played by John Savage, of The Deer Hunter, he goes to New York. Yes.
Quite a span of two different films, that, isn't it?
Yeah, unusual pairing. And I thought he was bigger than he was, but I looked through his career on IMDb, and I think this and Deer Hunter were sort of two of the bigger ones.
He's someone who you've always seen in something, though, isn't he?
Yeah, you do know his face really well. I thought I'd seen him in more things.
According to this, he was also in, according to Google, he was also in Do the Right Thing as well.
Was he?
Yeah,
was he the restaurant owner?
I think he might be.
That was Paul Sorvino, wasn't it?
I've seen Paul. Yeah, Mira Sorvino's dad.
Hold on, let me just quickly Wikipedia it.
No, this is accurate. I'd have to watch it again with an eye out for him to find out where he is, but yeah, he's in it.
I'm intrigued.
Clifton, his character's called, and he must be like one of the side characters in it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what he's sort of a guy carrying a bike up some stairs.
Oh, right. Sorry for this weird detour, guys.
Sorry, I was just really intrigued. I was thinking, I just don't remember him from Do the Right Thing at all. Anyway, John Savage, blah blah, Deer Hunter. He goes to New York for a few days of R&R before before the draft takes him. He's had his draft papers and he starts basic training with the army. But before being shipped out to Vietnam, he has these couple of days leave before doing even the basic training. And in Central Park, he meets a ragtag bunch of people living communally in the woods. Yes, again, my people, who befriend him and introduce him to a life of peace and love, which involves smoking weed, destroying tableware, and chasing horses, which I didn't realise were on the hippie manifesto, but there you go.
I was going to say, that's, you started well.
And then it went off on a bit of a detour. Yeah. I was prepared for this film. Hair. It's so iconic to be some old hippie stuff with the flares and the weed and the peace and blah, blah, blah. But actually, I'm watching the film, that's exactly what happened. The main features of this film are, of course, the songs. And the opening number is The Age of Aquarius. It's still hugely powerful. It's a fantastic song, especially as sung by Ren Woods, who inexplicably isn't a huge music star. I don't know why that is. I've never heard of her. And she's got this awesome voice. And it literally gave me goosebumps. It was so powerful, the vocal. It was one of those vocals where it just blasts out of the screen at you and sort of makes its way subdermally into your body. I can say the same thing actually about Cheryl Barnes, another singer I've not heard of, who sings Easy to Be Hard, which is a phenomenal, deeply soulful voice, but somehow we've not heard of her either. I don't know how this is possible. They're both fantastic singers, wonderful at conveying a song, really selling a song.
So kind of like an Aretha Franklin effect, really.
Yeah, especially Cheryl Barnes, she's along those lines. I think probably Ren Woods is more along the Gladys Knight sort of feel,
nice.
But both way up there. Massive quality to those voices. And yes, so Aquarius opens the film, and then shortly after is a song called Sodomy. Nice. Which then goes on to name various aspects of sex, and it's there for no other reason than to shock. I think it lasts about 20 seconds. It's not really a song. It's just to provoke people who are a bit proper, I think. Another great song, Good Morning Sunshine, which always reminds me of Monty Burns, The Simpsons, which is just a gorgeous little song as well. And then right in the middle, a song I'd never heard of called White Boys / Black Boys. And it's an incredible sequence where you see recruits being given their medical test for the army, and they have to walk in front of a panel of about 8 guys, just basically naked. And this apparently is part of the medical. I mean, I'm mystified, but there you go. The 8 guys, mixed race, there's white guys, there's black guys, then start singing, joining in with everybody who's singing this song about the various good points of white boys and black boys. And part of the panel, and I'm watching the panel singing this song, and I'm thinking, that's some good voices. They harmonise really well together. They sound a bit like the oh wait, it actually is the Stylistics. It's literally the Stylistics. So they sound amazing. They sound just like the oh wait.
So what, you give them a record deal?
You should do. Yeah, you don't want to be in the army. You want to be singing with flares and things. Yeah. So yeah. Oh yeah, and you know that I got my hands, got my arms, got my legs, got my feet, got my blah, blah, that one, which I clearly don't know the lyrics to. That's in there as well. It's a slightly different version, and Elvis isn't involved in it as well.
It was Nina Simone did the famous version.
Yes, yeah, and she does a cracking version. I'm less keen on it in the film, but maybe that's because I just know Nina Simone's version.
Right.
The final song is "Let the Sunshine In," which is a fabulous song, and when it's so immersive, isn't it? You're just thinking, "Oh, this is gorgeous." And when the film is over, it's obviously the final bit of it, the final song you hear. But then I immediately went to YouTube to watch the final sequence of the 40-Year-Old Virgin to compare how they tackle it. And they do a really similar job, although obviously very much with the label comedy rather than earnest joie de vivre. The film, the only thing about the film is that it feels so episodic, even for a musical. It's loosely strung together, like teeth on a Kentucky banjo player, but a plot emerges towards the end about, he moves to Oklahoma, and then you mess about for, an hour and a half, and then, I have to go and join the army now. But there's a twist, obviously, at the end. Other people in the cast include Treat Williams, who is a face that has been, again, in loads of things, but I don't know whether he's been a lead in anything again.
Yeah, he was... Sidney Lumet did a few films with Treat Williams, like Prince of the City, but it didn't quite took off.
I thought I recognised that name.
Yeah. Beverly D'Angelo's in it, and I think she went on to do what do you call them? Oh, there's a Christmas one, and there's a Go on Holiday one, and
National Lampoon.
Yes, that's it. I think she was in that. But in this, and with most of the females in this film, it's just set decoration. They have no real depth to them. And most of the nudity, well, I don't know. You get a balance of male and female nudity, but yeah. So apart from Treat Williams, John Savage, Beverly D'Angelo, you've got half the members of the suite, and a woman who looks like the offspring of Tyne Daly and Liza Minnelli. So it's a visual interest. I think the whole film has quite a lot of messages. It wants to tell you how rubbish racism is, and it occasionally alludes to being supportive of gay relationships. But in the context, and I had to look this up, and I stared at it with disbelief, right? In the context of homosexuality being illegal in the United States, like it was illegal, it's still illegal in some states to be gay until 2003.
Crikey.
Yes, 2003.
I mean, did they not listen to Italian puppeteers of the 15th century?
Apparently apparently there was no influence that went over there, no. So, yes, they have understandably had to take a bit of a cautious route in the film. It's very firmly anti-war, and this is the overriding take-home message. It's a product of its time. It's old-fashioned, but at its heart, it's basically in the right place. The film, obviously, it's don't be racist is one of the messages. Be more accepting, relax more. It's fine if you need to run around in the nip. You can get your mad stuff out the way when you're a teenager. All these messages come across, but the overriding one is, don't go to war. I think if I had to choose one piece of positive advice from the film, it will be go out and grab life, push the boundaries, escape oppression, try everything, go for it, live, live, live. Don't die in a war. So, did you know Madonna and Springsteen auditioned for this film?
No.
Oh.
Yes. And there was 20,000 extras in the military and anti-war protest scenes.
Wow.
It's available now on BFI, from BFI on DVD. There are also extras on the disc, including an 8-minute trippy animation with a mellow, jazzy, cosmic 1968 style score, and another Indian hippie, trippy, psychedelic film with the sitar and tabla. Oh, I just dived into that completely. But it's really all about carnations. So, yeah, excellent. It's definitely a period piece, but it's very enjoyable as well. So, yes, that is Hair, directed by Miloš Forman and out now from the BFI.
Excellent. Well, let's take a look at next week's releases and try and guess which one of them could be most improved by a brief musical number called Sodomy. First up, it's The Two Popes.
Oh dear.
Yes, this is Fernando Meirelles' Netflix film starring Anthony Hopkins as Pope Benedict and Jonathan Pryce as Pope Francis.
That's really interesting.
Fernando Meirelles. Is he the director of City of God?
That's him.
Oh my God, what?
I mean, we've been talking about big directorial U-turns, but this...
That does sound interesting. I did wonder what had gone on behind the scenes at the time of that when Ratzenberger decided, don't want to be Pope anymore.
It was very odd, wasn't it? And
weird.
I'll happily watch Jonathan Pryce in anything because I think he's a genius.
Absolutely. Excellent.
Not the only thing that's on Netflix, although The Two Popes is a theatrical release. It will be on Netflix towards Christmas, but we also have the release on Netflix of Martin Scorsese's The Irishman.
Yes.
Have you seen this already, Graham?
I have seen this already, and I'm hoping we will be getting into that a bit next week because there is a lot to discuss.
Okay.
Yes.
We've got The Street, a documentary about gentrification shot over 4 years in London by Zed Nelson.
Oh, interesting.
Ever since you brought up like The Last Black Man of San Francisco, I cannot take the word gentrification seriously anymore.
I killed that word for you. It's like me when as soon as I started watching Futurama, Zap Brannigan meant I could never hear the word erotic without giggling. Try and think of it in anyone else's voice.
It's just such a weird word.
Erratic. We've got a follow-up to a film that I'm pretty sure everyone on this show really loved. Jennifer Kent's next film after The Babadook. This is The Nightingale, an Australian revenge western with Aisling Franciosi and Sam Claflin.
Yeah, it's been a while since we last saw her. Yeah.
I like that she's took her time and done something that she really wants to do.
Kind of like Lynn Ramsey in a way.
Exactly, yeah. We've got Atlantics, which made Matty Diop into the first black woman to win Best Director at Cannes earlier this year.
Wow.
And the funny part is that since Cannes absolutely can't stand Netflix have picked it up.
Yes! We've got another film by a female director, which I don't think did get anything at this year's Cannes, Charlie's Angels by Elizabeth Banks.
I demand to know why. I'm definitely watching that, however trashy it is. I cannot wait. I'm so excited about that film.
Is it just Kristen Stewart's haircut, or is there something else I'm missing?
It's a little bit Kristen Stewart, yes.
There's a 20th anniversary reissue of Stanley Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut, which is being put back out with a supporting documentary called Never Just a Dream.
One of the few Kubricks I haven't seen.
Yeah, I've not seen that. I can remember it having sort of quite mediocre reviews at the time.
It really polarised people. I think a lot of what it was criticised over was kind of the point.
Right.
It's criticising Eyes Wide Shut for not being sexy is a bit like criticising A Clockwork Orange for not being very feel good. We've got what looks like a pretty terrific piece of full-on entertainment, in my opinion, Knives Out by Rian Johnson, with a cast including Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, Toni Collette, Lakeith Stanfield, Anna de Armas, Don Johnson, Catherine Langford, Ricky Lindholm and Christopher Plummer.
Ricky Lindholm, yay!
Yeah!
Lakeith Stanfield, yay!
Yay! We love him.
Something for everyone in that cast, I think.
Yeah.
We've got Kevin Smith is doing a new Jay and Silent Bob film, which I can't think of anything less relevant than that, but he done it.
Well, I know what's taking up the headline slot next show.
We've got John Pilger's The Dirty War on the National Health Service, which, thanks to pre-election purdah rules, I can't comment on.
What happened to John Pilger?
He's still working. He tends not to do much TV stuff anymore. He tends to do film work, which honestly I can see, because by the noughties he was a really weird fit on ITV. Coming up next, Celebrity Juice, but before that, here's John Pilger with a film about the aftermath of the East Timor genocide.
Okay.
And finally, also in British Documentarians Corner, there's a film called Shooting the Mafia, which I know very little about, but it is directed by Kim Longinoto, who is a really important documentarian.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've seen a couple of her films, and she's really good.
She's great, isn't she? Yeah, more people should know her. So we're spoiled for choice next week, which is why we're not choosing. We're having a photo negative show. We're doing new releases in the off-the-shelf section. I don't know if anyone's got theirs nailed down yet. I'm feeling pretty flexible. It might be The Nightingale.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards The Irishman way because, I mean, well...
Scorsese, De Niro, Pesci, Pacino, Keitel, what more do you want?
And I'm veering towards Knives Out because it's like, it's one of my favourite things about every Christmas is that you're going to get some sort of Christie-like show on, and it reminds me of that, so I'd like to go and see that.
Yeah. Also really happy to see Rian Johnson doing crime films again. I don't think there is anyone of his generation who does them better.
Cool.
So yeah, what that means is that our headline review is going to be a director's lottery pick. Aidan, have you got the randomizer ready?
I do. Oh, the suspense is killing me. It is director number 72.
72, which is, that's a classy pick you've made for us. It's Vittorio De Sica.
Right, okay. Here we go.
So tell me about him.
Do we go for one of the classics like Bicycle Thieves that essentially invented the language of cinematic realism? Do we go for one of the later ones? I'll bring up a list of the things he did.
Great filmmaker though. I mean, Bicycle Thieves is one of my all-time favourite films.
Well, I've never seen it.
Yesterday, Today and Tomorrow, The Garden of the Fitzy Contis. I do have a big love for like the years when he would just turn up and do something really out of character in in an anthology film, but I don't think he would get away with that. Umberto D, Marriage Italian Style, which won Sophia Loren her Oscar.
I think I reviewed that one when Cult Films put out the DVD about a couple of years back. Yeah.
God bless Cult Films for just strip mining Sophia Loren's career. Yes. They put out some amazing stuff on that. But yeah, I mean, Bicycle Thieves is obviously a hot contender, but we'll give it a few days. We'll have a think and come back with that, with The Irishman, Knives Out, and The Nightingale, which I think that's a pretty great show lined up right there.
Definitely.
So until then, that's been your lot from Cinema Eclectica. I've been Graham.
I've been Aidan.
And I've been Sarah.
See you next week.